Section 3 is going to cover demand, supply, and the market equilibrium. So you guys should remember that markets are kind of an idea of this big bubble. And it's where we have communication between our buyers and our sellers. Buyers come in to see what options they have, what their choices are, and the sellers come in to show all the buyers what they have to choose from. It's important that we understand that there are going to be large numbers of independently acting buyers and sellers of a standardized product in each of these markets. Now, this is a definition of something that we learned in the last chapter, and that's competition. For this chapter, or this section, we're just going to be looking at how demand and supply are affected within a market that contains actual pure competition, which we'll see soon. So demand is just a scheduled curve that shows the amounts of a product that people are willing and able to purchase. So willing means that they want to, and able means that they got the money to do it. They have the income. They have the dollars in their pockets that are at least or greater than the amount that's needed to take that item home with them. And then we're always going to keep a specified period of time, so we hold time constant. Remember, it goes along with this idea of ceteris paribus, or this other things equal. So demand is going to show us the quantities of a product that are going to be purchased at various possible prices. So we can see that demand is going to involve price and quantity. Looking at the relationship between these two variables. The law of demand states that all else equal, as price falls, then quantity demanded is going to rise. And as price rises, quantity demanded falls. You guys should remember what type of relationship this shows. It's an inverse relationship, noticing that quantity demanded and price are moving in opposite directions. We have 4 reasons for that. First, it goes with common sense. The idea that you have a set amount of money in your pocket, you go to the grocery store, and you're hungry. If you find that the price of things that you're originally going to buy anyways have decreased, then now you can buy more of them and fill up your belly. Second is diminishing marginal utility. Remember, another word for marginal, it's just change. Another word for utility, just happiness. So your change in happiness that you get from each successful unit for a particular product, you less and less. Another way for you to say this, or to understand this, is that the first piece of pizza that you eat is absolutely delicious. The next is still good. It fills you up, but it wasn't as good as the first. The third, it's not as good as the first or the second, but it still makes you feel better because it fills you up more. And then say that you start getting full after the 5th piece, and you just keep eating. Eventually, you'll just end up in the bathroom throwing up, and then your diminishing marginal utility now has probably turned into negatives because you're not happy. It's just making you sadder or less happy. We have this income effect that says purchasing power increases if price decreases. So say we have a price decrease, our purchasing power will increase. Right, that's given that we have this set amount of income. Makes sense if you go into the store and you have $10 in your pocket. If originally you wanted to get, say, 2 DVDs, each one costs $5. So you have $10 going into Walmart, and then now you can buy 2 DVDs with that $10. Whereas if the price drops to $2.50 a DVD, then now you walk into Walmart with your $10 and you can get 4 DVDs. Your purchasing power has increased because the price of whatever good you wanted to buy has decreased. and you still have the same amount of money in your pocket. Our substitution effect says that the lower the price is, and buyers are going to have the incentive to move to that now least or less expensive product. Move away from those relatively more expensive. So say I go to the store and I have a choice between Coke and Pepsi. I'm going to go to which, given that each one's a cola and just makes me equally happy, I'm just going to choose whichever one has the lowest price. So our demand curve has quantity demanded on the horizontal axis, and then price on the vertical axis. And if the demand curve shows an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, you guys should already know how to draw this. All right, this is just our normal demand. So let's see what it looks like from the book. Lo and behold, same thing. Have this downward sloping demand curve showing this inverse relationship. Say we start off here at point A, come over, what's our price? 5. Come down, what's our quantity demanded? 10. Now we come here to B, price decreases to 4. Price on the vertical, quantity demanded on the horizontal. We're here at this decrease from 5 to 4, come over to B. What happens to our quantity demanded? It increases. This inverse relationship. To find our market demand, all we do is sum up all of our total. So here, or each individual. So here we have Joe, Jen, and Jay. We have 3 buyers in this market. Over here is our market demand. Notice that we have the same price for each good. So we just keep that same market price. And to find the quantity demanded, we just look at where that price intersects the demand curve. So Joe wants 35. Jen wants 39. And Jay wants 26. To find the amount of the market, you just add them all together. 35 plus 39 plus 26. And that gives us 100. So we know market demand will be 100. If we want to find out determinants of demand, or factors that change demand, then we have to look at consumer tastes, which are just preferences, how much you like the good, numbers of buyers, how many individuals are in this market that are buying, consumers' incomes, the prices of related goods, and consumer expectations. You guys will learn that consumer incomes depends on whether the good is normal or inferior. And then for price of related goods, it'll matter whether it's a complementary good or a substitute. The change in demand is shown by a shift in the demand curve. So say we start off here with D1, quantity demanded down on the horizontal, price on the vertical. Show an increase in demand, we have a shift up and to the right. So this would be D2, our increase. Whereas if we want to show a decrease in demand, so this is D1, left and downwards to D2. Quantity demanded and price. So for our tastes, a favorable change in consumer tastes or preferences, so if we have an increase in tastes, then a change that makes a product more desirable, more of it will be demanded. So we know that if we have an increase in tastes, we're going to have an increase in demand, or a shift to the right. Notice this is a positive relationship. For the number of, I'll go and scroll down here for you guys. For the number of buyers, an increase in the number of buyers in a market is going to increase product demand. Once again, another positive relationship. For income, we have a difference between the two goods. So normal goods are products whose demand varies directly with money income. So if income increases, actually I'll just go ahead and make that a easier color for you guys. So normal will just be blue. Very directly, and that means demand will increase, right? The very directly. Whereas inferior goods, it varies inversely. So if income increases, demand will decrease. The idea behind this is that inferior goods would be something like ramen. So if my income were to increase, then I'd stop buying ramen, and a more normal good would be eating at a restaurant. So the more income I have, the more I'll go out to eat. For the prices of related goods, we have a substitute good and a complementary good. Substitute is that one can be used in place of another, whereas a complementary is a good that's used with the other. So for substitutes, an increase in the price of a substitute will cause the demand for the other good to increase. An example of this, so that means if we have the price of a substitute increasing, then the demand for our original good will increase. Say if I'm looking at Coke, and an idea for this is Coke and Pepsi. If I'm at the store and each costs 50 cents, it doesn't matter which one I buy, whereas say Pepsi now increases to $1. So if the price of a substitute, the price of Pepsi increases, then my demand for Coke will increase. Notice that price for Pepsi increased, so my demand for Coke will increase. For complements, if the price of a complement goes up, then the demand for the related good will decrease. An idea for this are hot dogs and hot dog buns. You're only going to buy hot dog buns if you want to get a hot dog to go with it. If the price for hot dogs increases, then you're going to stop buying as many hot dogs, and you're not just going to keep buying hot dog buns to sit around the room. Right? You'll just decrease the demand for the hot dog buns also. If we have unrelated goods, another way to say that is just independent goods. So the last determinant in demand is consumer expectations. So if someone has a newly formed expectation of higher future prices, then they might want to buy now before price increases. So if consumers increase or expect a price increase for the future, then demand today, or present demand, is going to increase. Whereas if consumers expect a future price to decrease, then the demand today, or the present demand, will decrease. So you have this positive relationship between the two. So if we have a change in demand, that's going to be a shift of the demand curve. So we actually move it. It's a new line. Whereas a change in quantity demanded is just a movement along that line. And here, down here, can actually show this. So if we are to go, we start off here at D1. If I'm here at point A, I have a price of 3. I say a quantity demanded of about 7. If my price decreases down to 2, then I'll be here, and now at point B, notice along the same demand curve. Just come down here, and then now notice I have an increase in my quantity demanded. So this red movement along the same demand curve is just a change in quantity demanded. So it's changed by a change in, which is caused by a change in price in the actual good. Whereas if we have a change in demand, if we have an increase in demand, we have this whole brand new line here. And if we have a decrease in demand, then we have this whole brand new line to the left of our original demand curve. So for supply, it's very similar to demand, but has an opposite type of relationship between price and quantity. So supply is going to show the amounts that producers are willing and able to make at a series of possible prices. So again, we're going to see this relationship between price, except quantity supplied instead of quantity demanded. So the law of supply states a positive or direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. So if price increases and we have a positive relationship, that means quantity supplied will also increase, which we see below us here on our supply curve. See, we have price on the vertical, quantity supplied on the horizontal, or origin down here. So as price increases, we want to see an increase in quantity supplied. We have this upward and sloping to the right line. To find the market supply, it's the same as finding the market demand. We find the sum of each individual suppliers. Say this is supply 1, first supplier, second supplier, third supplier. We add them all up to get our market supply. So here we have the same price for all of them. Come down, so we get the quantity supplied for first one, quantity supplied for the second one, quantity supplied for the third one. To find our market supply, all we do is it's equal to the quantity supplied of the first plus the quantity supplied of the second plus the quantity supplied of the third. We're just adding all of these up. Just like demand, we have determinants of supply, things that can change supply. Right, it's this idea of a new curve or new line. Resource prices, technology, taxes and subsidies, prices of other goods, producer expectations, and the number of sellers. The easiest way to remember all of these is how it affects costs. Because the relationship between cost and supply is that if costs increase, supply will decrease. Notice this inverse relationship between cost and supply. So, if resource prices increase, Remember, higher resource prices raise costs. So if resource prices increase, costs increase, thus supply decreases. So here we have an inverse relationship between price and supply. For technology, an increase in technology lets them produce more units of output with fewer resources, which means costs decrease. See, it lowers production costs, thus increases supply. So we have a positive relationship here between technology and supply. For taxes and subsidies, businesses treat most taxes as costs. So if taxes increase, here I'll draw this down here to say it. Taxes increase, costs increase, the supply decreases. So we have an inverse relationship between taxes and supply. Whereas with subsidies, our taxes in reverse. So if subsidies increase, that just means costs decrease, the supply increases. So we have a positive relationship. For the prices of other goods, whenever there's a substitution in production, it means that we're going from the price of the original good to the price of a substitute good. Say that I have two choices. I'm a farmer, and I can either grow corn or soybeans. Say it starts off, corn is 50 cents and soybeans is 50 cents a bushel. So price equals 50 cents for each. If the price of soybeans increase so that it equals $1 a bushel, then I will now stop production of corn and then use all of that land and then start up production of soybeans. So instead of planting corn, I will now plant soybeans. So if prices of other goods increase, then the supply of the original good will decrease. So we have an inverse relationship. Producer expectations. It's more difficult to generalize what's going to happen because it's the difference whether you're something like a farmer or whether you're something like a manufacturer. A farmer can very quickly change its supply because when a farmer finishes making his crop and then he just holds his crop. Right? If he has all this wheat, he can just put it into a silo if he wants to hold it. So if he expects a higher wheat price in the future, then he can just hold all of his current supply and then increase it in the future. So if I'm a farmer and I expect price of the future to increase, then my supply today or of the present will decrease. And then once I hit the supply of the future, it will increase. Whereas with this manufacturer, if the manufacturer expects prices will increase in the future, then they have to add more workers. And they have to expand their production facilities in order to meet that increased supply. So for the manufacturer, if they expect future prices to increase, then the present supply or supply today will increase by a little bit. And then once the future supply is possible, once they hire all their new labor and all their new factories and other capital and land, then they'll have that full increase in supply. So it depends on what type of producer that you are for what present supply reaction you have from this expected increase in future prices. And the last determinant of supply is the number of sellers. So other things equal, an increase in the number of sellers is going to increase market supply. So again, we have this positive relationship. It's important that we realize the differences between a change in supply, which is the shift of the supply curve, right? A new line. And then just a change in quantity supplied is along the same line. It's just moving points. So here we have our original supply curve here at S1. So here we start off here at A. Here you have price of 3. Quantity supplied of about 7. If we increase price, so here to $4, come over to the supply curve, we move along the same supply curve, S1. We come down and we find we've had an increase in quantity supplied, right? This positive relationship. This is our change in quantity supplied. It's just caused by a change in price. Whereas a change in supply is a new line. Or if we have a decrease in supply, then it moves to the left. If we have an increase in supply, it moves to the right. Notice that a change in price can only change quantity supplied. For the market equilibrium, it's very important that we remember we're looking at a competitive market. So remember we have multiple buyers and sellers, and that neither of them can set the price because they're acting independently. So this entire idea of finding out where we stop or where marginal cost and marginal benefit no longer change is this idea of equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So another word for equilibrium price is a market clearing price. Or it's where the actions or the intentions of buyers and sellers match, where they equal each other. That's why it's called the equilibrium. So it's when quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. So, as you can guess, the idea to find the equilibrium price is by finding the point where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. To find the equilibrium quantity, we also find where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. So once again, we just find where QD equals QS. To find this, it's just a graphical interpretation of the intersection between the supply curve and the demand curve. So if we have our market with quantity down here, price up here, we have our demand curve and our supply curve, where they intersect right here in the middle, so this is our equilibrium. All we do is come down to the horizontal axis, find Q star, come over to the price axis, find P star. This is our equilibrium price and our equilibrium quantity. At this quantity, or at this equilibrium point, we know that quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. So here to show it on this, we have our supply curve here. And our demand curve, remember, is downward sloping, price on our vertical axis, quantity on our horizontal axis. So in this model right here, in the center, this is our equilibrium. So our equilibrium price, we come over to the vertical axis because that's where price lives. Equilibrium price would be 3. And then just come down from the equilibrium point, come down to the horizontal axis, and our equilibrium quantity would be 7. Remember, this equilibrium is where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Another way to say it, where supply equals demand. See, it's where they intersect one another. Now, we can stray away from the equilibrium, and that's not good. Notice that if that happens, say for example, for some reason, we're stuck here at a price of 4. We come over, first we hit the demand curve, so we come down, and we find that quantity demanded equals 4. Keep coming across at this price of $4. Eventually we'll hit the supply curve. So now we come down to the horizontal axis to find quantity. We'll find the quantity supplied equals 10. Notice that the number or the amount that people are actually able and willing to buy is much less than what the sellers are producing. So because of this, we have 6, and then they do it in thousands, so that's why it says 6,000 bushel surplus. We call it a surplus because whenever we have a surplus, our quantity demanded is less than quantity supplied. So we have quantity supplied is greater than, thus we have a surplus of supply. Now we have, the idea of this is that, so you go to in the store, there are 10 bushels on the shelves. People come into the store and people only buy 4 bushels. So there are 4 bushels purchased. How many are still left over on the shelves? 6 bushels. So if there's any left over, then that means we have a surplus. Whereas if we have a price below our equilibrium price, so say hey, we have a price here of 2, we come over, what do we hit first? Hit supply first. So then we come down, and then for a price of 2, we have a quantity supplied equal to 4. We continue to come across, and then we hit the demand curve. At a price of $2, our quantity demanded is equal to 11. So now we have something called a shortage, because we have this shortage when quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. See, 11 is greater than 4. So over here we have 4 bushels on shelves, but we have 11 that want to be purchased. So how many are going to be left over on the shelves? 0 will be left on shelves, but there will still be 8 people waiting in line. To get it. So you'll have 0, you won't have any more stuff on the shelves at the store, but you'll still have people standing around wanting that good. wishing it was there. So a surplus is when you have extra goods, and then a shortage is when you have extra people. So if you have extra people waiting around, then all the goods are gone. It's a shortage because they're short on goods. Whereas a surplus is when they have an extra amount of goods, or too many of them. Another way to say it is that surplus here, I didn't do it with purple. Yeah, surplus is just excess supply, whereas a shortage is excess demand. Remember, when we have a shortage, or when we have this surplus, quantity demanded is less than quantity supplied. And when we have a shortage, quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. When we're at an equilibrium, quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. So the rationing function of prices is the ability for competition to force supply and demand into an equilibrium. So rationing functions of prices just says that it causes an equilibrium within the market. So we can have this quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. We have two different types of efficient allocation. We have productive efficiency. So that's the production of any particular good in the least costly way. So it minimizes cost. And then we have allocative efficiency. That's when the particular mix of goods and services most highly valued by society. So when we're producing where marginal benefit equals marginal cost. Remember in the first chapter, I told you guys that essentially you can just say marginal benefit equals demand for the good. And then now we can also say supply equals the marginal cost for that good. So we assure allocative efficiency when demand equals supply. When we produce at this special point, that's when we have equilibrium. So what happens if we have changes in supply or demand? In this first model, we have an increase in demand. So we start off here at D1. Notice that we have this much amount of quantity and this much amount of price. So P1 and Q1. And then we have an increase in demand, which shifts our demand curve up and to the right. So now we find the new equilibrium where it intersects supply, come down. Notice we've had an increase in quantity and an increase in price. Whereas if we have a decrease in demand, we start up here at our first equilibrium point. Q1, come over here to the price, find P1. And then what happens when we have a drop in demand? It comes down to the left. So we have our new demand curve here at D2. Found our new equilibrium point where it intersects the supply curve. We have Q2, our second quantity, and then P2, our second equilibrium price. See, we both have this decrease in price and this decrease in quantity. And then both of these are just explained over here. You can just see it in the box. So a decrease in demand will lead to a decrease in price and quantity, and an increase in demand will lead to an increase in price and quantity. So now with supply, so we have an increase in supply. We move from S1, find the first equilibrium point. So we find Q1, P1, our first equilibrium price and quantity. And then when we have an increase in supply, remember it moves to the right. Move over here to S2. Find our new equilibrium point where supply and demand intersect. Come down to the horizontal axis to find our Q2, our equilibrium quantity. Then come over here to the vertical axis to find our equilibrium price. Notice price has decreased, it's come closer to the origin, and then quantity is increased, means going farther away from the origin. That's origin 0 right here. So we have this increase in supply is going to cause a decrease in price, but an increase in quantity. Now what if we have a decrease in supply? Start up here at S1, find the equilibrium, come down, Q1, come over here to the left to our vertical axis, P1. Now we have a decrease in supply, so we move over here to the left, here to S2, come along our new supply curve, find our new equilibrium, come down, Q2, our second equilibrium quantity, come over here to the vertical axis, P2. Notice we see we've come further away from the origin, thus we're increasing in price, but we've come closer to the origin for quantity, thus we're decreasing in quantity. So if we have a decrease in supply, we have an increase in price and a decrease in quantity. Now we do have some types of complex cases. Say that first we have a supply increase. So S increases, and then we have demand decrease. Well, let's see what happens. First, we have this increase in supply. So what happens to our prices? They decrease. Remember, our quantity increased. But now, if we have a decrease in demand, say into D2, remember that we say that we're now, once we increase supply, we look only at that new supply curve. So we find that new equilibrium at where those two new curves meet. So our new demand and our new supply come down. This would be our new quantity, so Q3. So we see we decrease a little bit, and then we come across and we find that price decreases even more. Now what happens if we have a supply decrease and a demand increase? So supply decreases and then demand increases. Well, here we can see when we have this decrease in supply, we're now along S2. So the first thing that happens is we have an increase in price, but we have a decrease in quantity. Now, if we have an increase in demand, it will shift our demand curve up and to the right. So see, we're up here at D2. Remember, we find the equilibrium point where both of our new demand curve and our new supply curve intersect. So right here. Come down. Q3, notice our quantity increased and our prices increased even more. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this for you guys so we can do the other two. So what if we have a supply increase and a demand increase? So if we have a supply increase, move over here to S2. This is our new supply curve. Q2, we've had this increase in quantity. P2, we've had this decrease in price. But now, we have an increase in demand. And how do we show an increase in demand? By movement up and to the right. We shift it to the right. And remember, to find our new equilibrium, we have to look at our new demand curve and our new supply curve. To find where they intersect, where they touch each other, they cross each other. Come down here, find Q3. Once again, quantity increases. Come over here and find that price increases. So what if we have a supply decrease and then a demand decrease? So whenever we have a decrease in supply, moves to the left. If you're at a new S2, we have our new supply curve. Find the equilibrium where it intersects demand. Come down. Q2, we've had a decrease in quantity. P2, an increase in price. And then when we have a demand decrease, or we move demand to the left, we have a decrease in demand. We want to find the new equilibrium. We just find where our new supply curve and our new demand curve intersect. Come down. We find that quantity also decreases again. And we find that price will also decrease. So we have a decrease in price and a decrease in quantity. Some application. So we can have price ceilings. So a price ceiling is when it sets the maximum legal price that a seller may charge for a product or service. The easiest way I have teach students about this is, say you're starting out at the origin, or your goal is like, so you're on the floor, or like if you're a person in a room and you're standing on the ground, you try to jump as high as you can, right? When are you going to stop? You're going to get stopped when you hit this ceiling. So for our graph, when you jumping is our vertical axis, and this is PC, our price ceiling, right? So if think of you as the price, you're trying to jump as high as you can, you keep getting stopped because you're hitting your head on this ceiling. So we have the price ceiling right here. So notice here we're at the origin. We're trying to increase price. Boom. We hit this price ceiling right here. So now our price cannot go any higher than this price ceiling. Now what does that ceiling do to our market if our equilibrium price, remember we find the equilibrium by supply equals demand, come over, find equilibrium price is $3.50. But the ceiling price is $3. So what happens when price is less than the equilibrium? We have a shortage. Notice we come down here, find where supply is intersected by price, find our quantity supplied, and keep coming over, find demand, QD. And then what's happening here? Our quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. So that means we have people left over. Thus we have a shortage. There are more people that want the goods than there's actually goods to go around. People are standing around asking, all right, where's my Tickle Me Elmos during that Christmas that one year? So because we have this regulation, it's causing a shortage. There's too little of the good in the market. So because of we have this shortage now, then we create a rationing problem. The government now has to decide how it can equitably distribute this small amount. Since you're still going to have these people left over, now you have to ration it out to make it equal so that people that didn't get it don't feel left out or they're not as upset. A shortage will also cause black markets. So, if we see all these demanders here, so all this right here are people that are willing to pay all of this money here to get that good. So all of this is where we'll have this black market. Because quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. So things like drugs, where you can't get them legally on the market, essentially they have a price ceiling of $0 because they're not allowed to be sold. Then you have this black market for drugs because people still demand them, and so they just find ways in order to fulfill that demand. Another reason we have shortages are rent controls. So rent controls can cause renters to charge a minimum or a maximum price to renters. So say that renters want to charge $3.50 per month for rent. But then the government comes in and says, no, you can only charge $3. You only charge a maximum of $3 per month. Because of that, we're going to have more people wanting to rent than there are renting places or places to be rented. So another type of problem that we can have is called a price floor. And that's the minimum price fixed by the government. So the idea for this is that the origin's down here and you're trying to jump down onto the ground and then boom, you hit this floor. This price floor. So now there's no way you can get down to the origin. So it stops you. Say you're coming from the top and you're falling down and boom, you hit this floor. And it forces you to stop. So the idea here is you're coming, you're falling, and bam, you hit this price floor. So price is stuck above the equilibrium price. So here we hit demand first, come down, find our quantity demanded, then we keep coming along this price, hit supply, come down to the horizontal axis, find quantity supplied, and now we know that quantity demanded is less than quantity supplied. So we have a surplus. And that means we have goods left over on shelves. Or too many of the good. Notice that our equilibrium price is down here at $2. And when we have that, when we have equilibrium, our quantity demanded equals our quantity supplied. So in order for our price floor to be in effect, price floor has to be greater than the price. See, because this floor stops me from getting to the equilibrium. Whereas when we have a price ceiling, the price to keep me from getting to that equilibrium price. And then it causes a shortage. So the government can cope with a surplus by either restricting supply, so cause a decrease in supply, or the government can purchase the surplus of that output, which is another way of subsidizing, which it does with corn right now, or with many other types of food goods that agricultural people grow. And then they either store it or just burn it. So whenever we have a price floor or a price ceiling, it causes failure to achieve allocative efficiency. Because remember, if we have a price floor or price ceiling, quantity demanded does not equal quantity supplied. So when we have a price floor, consumers also pay higher prices. And if this is the second option, then we'll have to have an increase in taxes in order for the government to be able to pay that subsidy to farmers. Along with the allocative efficiency, price floors cause negative externalities, which we'll learn about. But it's just the idea that it's giving incentives to bring detrimental marginal resources into production. Because society only wants Q0 to be produced, Q0 is less than, QS, the quantity supplied. So people are making more than what the market actually wants. And that's why we have a surplus. So this is a lot of times when the government can intervene and then actually cause bad economic outcomes. It can cause shortages or surpluses, thus distorting resource allocation and causing bad side effects, such as incorrect incentives. Alright, that's the end of our third section. See you in the office hours.